Hello everyone, welcome back to my studio. In today's video I want to show you how I use an airbrush to create backgrounds. I'm going to run through all the supplies that you need. I'm going to list all those supplies in the description box below, and I'm also going to show you a demonstration of a piece of artwork from beginning to end. So why bother airbrushing? These backgrounds were created with either pastel pencils or coloured pencils, and they took a while because pencils have a tiny tip and there's a large area to cover. These pieces were completed using an airbrush with just the remaining part completed with mostly coloured pencils or acrylic. You can't tell which is which, so you can see why you can save so much time by airbrushing backgrounds. I found this image on Pixabay, so I'm going to show you how to create the background with it. This is the compressor. The airbrush set is $99, which includes the compressor, the airbrush and the hose, and that was way cheaper than my set of coloured pencils, which cost twice that much. This is the pressure control dial. It allows you to set the exact air pressure, and I keep mine at 30 psi. And this is the airbrush. It's called a dual action airbrush, meaning it has a trigger mechanism that allows you to control both the paint volume and the airflow. And this one has a gravity feed, and that means that there's just a top reservoir or cup for paint. To use it, hold the brush with your index finger on the trigger for control and press down on the trigger for air, pull back on the trigger for paint. You obviously need to use paint. The top two are quality airbrush paints. However, you don't have to use expensive brands. You can use any kind of acrylic. But to make sure student grade acrylics or craft paints don't clog, you just have to take an extra step. And that means thinning with distilled water and adding a few drops of Airbrush Medium for the correct viscosity. There's no exact ratio, but roughly half paint to water plus a few drops of medium to the consistency of skim milk. I like to mix up the ratio in advance to make the whole process a lot easier. You'll also want a water container, an old brush to mix, and a few paper towels. It's also handy to have a jar to pour out any of your unwanted paint between the colours. You'll also want some masking tape. A foam brush is nice to lay down some colour first to get a head start, and some stencils for the bokeh effect, and then some cleaner for afterwards. And of course you'll also want some paper, and you can practice at first with some poster board before you move on to some higher quality paper. The majority of the airbrush work is done with colour changes. I have some colour here and I want to change to a different colour. All I have to do is dump out that paint into a jar and rinse out the cup with some clean water from my water container. I just swirl around with the brush until it's relatively free of paint. If the colour's just a bit darker, I can just drop more right on top and continue to airbrush. Before adding a completely different colour, spray out all the unwanted paint first and rinse through thoroughly. A quick tip if things start getting a little clogged, you can easily unscrew this area on the front of the airbrush to reveal the needle. This area is probably gunked up, so you can just grab the dried paint with your fingernails, or you can use a little bit of the cleaner, drop a few drops of that onto the end of a cotton tip and just push that in gently and remove the paint that way. I covered the white background first with some acrylic paint using that foam brush and began spraying. You'll want to point the airbrush right at the paper, not at an angle. I'm just pulling back the trigger and letting paint come out, getting the main colours in and not worrying, as I'll just be covering everything up. I like to say with airbrush that there's no such thing as a mistake, just not enough layers. It's acrylic, so you can cover up just about anything and change just about everything. I'm moving in circular motions, looking at the reference to see where most of the colours are needing to go to get my first layer. I've masked off some of the openings I don't need in the stencil and am spraying right through the openings that I do want. It's a random process and certainly not exact. I'll be going back and forth covering all kinds of things up, and during this process I didn't hardly wash out the cup part of the airbrush, as it didn't matter if colours became contaminated with each other. Overlapping colours is usually found in the bokeh effects, so I made sure I added that, and sometimes I sprayed half a circle and other times a complete circle. But I did pay attention to the reference without copying exactly, which was impossible because I wanted the same kind of light source. Having all my colours diluted with water and medium in advance made everything go so much quicker. All I had to do was refill the cup and occasionally wash it out if I wanted to move to different colours. You'll use a lot of white when airbrushing, so bear that in mind when you're buying supplies. You'll learn a whole lot about colour mixing by airbrushing. When I first started out, I bought a lot of colours, like 24, and now I hardly use them as I know how to mix. But I found out not through using a colour wheel, but simply by doing. It's not intimidating, as there really aren't any mistakes, just spray right on top. And if you do mess up like I did here, it doesn't matter. I just used an old towel to mop things up and continued to spray until eventually it was no longer visible. It's great fun applying bokeh effects, and colours come out really vibrant with acrylic paint. You can knock colours back or recreate intensity. It's just all a matter of continuing to work until you're pleased with the effect, really. There's surprisingly little overspray with airbrushing, so it's less messy than you think. But do use towels everywhere, as acrylic dries permanently, so you don't want drops falling on nice floors or rugs. Wipe up any spills immediately, as everything dries fast too. When you're happy with the result of your airbrush, rinse out your airbrush and apply a few drops of cleaner into the cup, ready for next time. Everything dried really matte as well as flat, so with a sharp coloured pencil in black, I added the silhouette of the damselfly right on top of the acrylic background. I'm letting the background show through the wings. And because I masked off the paper all around, I have a nice clean edge to finish. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. It helps me out enormously. And don't forget to hit that little notification bell so that you can stay alerted to new content. See you in the next video.